Please welcome Susana Martinez-Conde and Stephen Macknik to the stage.
So a few years ago, we were writing our book about the neuroscience of magic and how magic tricks work in the brain. And we realized that we were very fascinated in the concept of psychics. Were psychics using the same kinds of techniques as magicians to actually get their customers to think they were actually reading their minds?
Something that you need to understand about us is that as neuroscientists studying magic and illusions, we are hardcore skeptics. We didn't understand how it's possible for psychics to fool their customers into believing that they're witnessing actual supernatural feats. So we had to go there and see with our own eyes how it's done.
So we registered at a psychic fair in Sedona, Arizona. Sedona, to paranormal believers, is one of the 14 power points of the Earth, and it can ground the vibrational frequencies from extraterrestrial sources. So it was the perfect location for our little experiment.
We didn't know what might be in store for us, so we had to do some advanced preparations. Through my reading, I learned that the psychic fair, there may be something on offer called psychometry, which is not quite as scientific as it sounds. Basically, you bring an item with you that you feel specially connected to, and psychics will provide a reading of that object's history and significance. After some consideration, I settled on a little metal toy soldier that I found inside of a chocolate Kinder egg as a child in the 1980s.
And I dug through our closets and pulled out some tie-dye t-shirts that were super groovy and far out, man, so we could blend in.
And with that, we were good to go.
All right, so we drive up to Sedona. We lived in Phoenix at the time. We show up at Sedona to a resort hotel ballroom, which wasn't exactly the drumming circle in the desert we had imagined, but inside was basically set up like every other conference we'd ever been to. There were vendors around the room. There were lines of chairs. And that's where the similarities started to break, because the vendors were selling things like potions and ointments that could cure your cancers and your wounds. And so you could get a psychic massage that would remove the negative frequencies from your body. So we realized that when we looked around, though, that it wasn't exactly the hippy-dippy, groovy set that we were expecting with free love and all of that. It was actually a bunch of older folks that could have fit in at a mall anywhere in the U.S.
We were literally the only two people in tie-dye inside.
Okay, so I'd imagined incense-filled tents and marijuana clouds and, you know, all sorts of things like that. And what we ended up with was something all completely different, because my attempts at camouflage completely failed.
We decided to split ways so we wouldn't stand out so much.
I went immediately to a table, a vendor who was selling psychic pictures.
And I decided to go and get some psychic advice on whether I should go back to school or remain a stay-at-home mom, which I've actually never been. But I created this character, a different person from who I am in reality, because I was partly curious to see whether the psychics might see through the facade. The first couple of psychics that I went to advised that I went back to school, but I figured that they were following very closely my body language and facial expressions. So when I nodded and smiled, they stayed the course, but if I frowned or acted confused, they would reverse themselves. They were basically telling me what they thought I wanted to hear.
I went to a table run by this guy named Elvis, and he had a box with a Polaroid camera in it, and inside the box was also a light source and a spinning color wheel. And he closed the box up and he took my picture with it, and I got this Polaroid and I was watching it develop, and it, developed into my face, and I was surrounded by this beautiful rainbow-colored aura with splotches of color all around. And Elvis explained to me that those splotches of color were my guardian angels and the energy I was giving off. And then he asked me for $33.
When the third psychic told me that she saw success in my future, I tried my best puzzle expression. So she quickly told me that she didn't mean professional success as such, but successful, meaningful personal relationships. She advised that I stay home with the kids. So I had proven my point, but it didn't feel quite as satisfying as I had envisioned. Throughout this whole experience, I had started to have the irrational, bizarre feeling that I was being a bit unfair to the psychics.
I headed to another table filled with all sorts of sundry items, flashlights and laser pointers, pendants, and these, I was told, had been quantum accelerated with crystals. So he also had these bracelets, and I was explained that inside there was a material that would actually polarize and align all the protons in my body, which of course, if it was true, would turn me into a magnet.
I was feeling a bit out of sorts after my psychic reading, so I decided to go check on Steve.
And I was so relieved when Susana showed up, because I was getting, kind of filled up to the brim with the pseudoscience. So I explained to Susana that the gentleman at the quantum acceleration table had just explained to me that he had taken this quantum accelerated laser pointer and used it to remove the cysts from his wife's breasts.
I literally could not think of any suitable reply to such a statement. All I managed to do was turn around 180 degrees and convulse in silent laughter.
She literally ran away.
It was time to get my first psychometry reading on my little soldier. But I was a bit concerned that no psychic would take the exercise seriously if I told them that I found the soldier inside of a chocolate egg. So instead I said that I had found this object lodged between two planks of wood at my old rental apartment in Boston, and that I felt a special connection to it.
So I was starting to feel a little depressed. We were writing this book on magic. We were working with magicians. We were going to Las Vegas and visiting them at their shows in casinos on the Strip. And one of the things we learned about these casinos is that the gamblers there, they're not all the happy-go-lucky gambling crowd you might expect, that many of them actually were kind of worried and desperate to win. That you realized you were standing next to somebody who might be having the very worst day of their life at any given time. And so we realized at the psychic fair that it was a similar feeling, that these people were feeling frantic and desperate themselves. And so this kind of led us to wonder, right? What was it that they were feeling, and why is it they were feeling this way?
I handed the toy soldier for the first psychometric reading and waited to hear the verdict. The psychic told me that the reason I felt this strong connection to the soldier was because this soldier represented me in a prior life. It's you, back when you were Caesar, she told me. Which frankly made me feel pretty good, although I didn't believe a word of it. But throughout this experience, I found myself bizarrely of two minds, being intensely skeptical, as it's my nature, but also wanting to know more. Then the psychic said, hold on, not Caesar himself, but one of his most trusted generals, which I still thought sounded pretty impressive. Until she said, wait a minute, who was Caesar again? Was he some sort of king?
Now, for the record, the soldier is a 1760s British infantryman with a musket on his shoulder.
The next psychic that I went to told me that this toy soldier was not an actual toy, but a chess piece from the 1940s that used to belong to this old gentleman named Aiken. And that the reason that I felt connected to it was because the soldier was from the same precise German town where I had lived my prior life as a scullery maid.
In her current life, it may be true that I haven't quite been able to let go of that whole scullery maid thing.
I don't even know what a scullery maid is. But the psychic did say that my life as a scullery maid had been mostly joyful. I had good friends and a husband who loved me. But I had this one sorrow, and is that even though I had very much wanted to have children, I never got to have any. That's so sad, I told the psychic. And I must have left my face unguarded for a second or two, because she asked me, is this something that you're struggling with in this life? And I said, no, I have 2 little boys. But I didn't mention the 2 pregnancy losses between my first and my second child. And I realized right then and there what a comfort it would have been a few years prior to believe in the concept of this one life out of the many lives that came before and just as many lives that will come right after.
So the attendees of this conference were clinging to the wispiest of false evidence. They were the ultimate consumers of false hope. That they were hoping that someone with authority would tell them that their cancer would go away, that their family and friends in the military would come home safe, that they would be reincarnated next time with a better life. Maybe they'd go from being a scullery maid to one of Caesar's generals. And the psychics there, we realized, were in fact using the magic tricks that we thought they were using, but they were really taking advantage of these people to tell them what they wanted to hear. They were how should I put this?
They were using their cognitive failures to their advantage. For one, I myself, as a staunch skeptic, was startled to find myself in a couple of there, but for the grace of God go I moments. I realized that believing can be much easier than disbelieving and feel a whole lot better. And that's both the beauty and the danger of the stories that we tell ourselves.
Exactly, and it of course was all an illusion. And as we drove home, we were in a thoughtful mood. I mean, we were thinking about how the psychics were in fact using the magic tricks that we had imagined when we drove up there in the first place, and we remained just as skeptical of psychic phenomena as when we arrived. But we also felt a lot more sympathy for our fellow attendees at the conference, that in fact, we realized that they brought an important component to the psychic phenomenon, which is that they bring to the table part of the illusion, which is the need to believe. Thank you.
Thank you.